Good evening, and thank you for joining our virtual cafe for We Are One United. Today, we will be talking about Dr. Martin Luther King with Dr. Dondria Cox and Joi Cox. Both are educators. Joi Cox with the Palm Springs Unified School District and Dondria with the Lynwood Unified School District. We are so glad that you ladies decided to join us this evening to give us some great information regarding Dr. King. And with that, I'll let you start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Cox, would you like to first start off while I pull up the...
Well, hello, my name is Dr. Don Cox. I've been working as a history teacher in the Lynwood Unified School District. I've been teaching for about 22 years, and my background consists of bachelor's, master's in curriculum instruction, and a doctor's degree in educational leadership and management.
All right, before I begin, are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is Joi Cox, and I have been on the battlefield of educating our wonderful students for over 26 long years. I'm tired, y'all, okay, tired. But you know what? I keep on keeping on. I have a bachelor's degree in communication because I wanted to be Oprah. But when I realized how hard Hollywood was, I said, I need something even harder. So I went into education. So having said that, I have a master's in education, and I'm completely unapologetically committed to multiculturalism. Okay. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I would love for you guys to take a look at our question. Our question for tonight: have we overcome? What would Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say? I think Dr. Cox, they would have a lot to say. He would have a lot to say, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And these two lovely ladies to the left is my beautiful sister, Dr. Dawn Cox, and I believe she already introduced herself, and I'm on the right. We're so glad to be here. Dr. Cox, we're going to make sure that everybody follows a code of conduct. Ladies and gentlemen, whenever we're having a conversation like this, it tends to get a little heated. So can we agree that we will abide by this code of conduct? Number one, we are just facilitators. I'm no expert on any of this. I have an opinion, as do you all. And I hope that you guys realize, number two, this is a safe place. So as you're sharing your opinions, let's try not to tear one another down. Number three, having said that, all opinions are valued. So if you don't necessarily agree, that's fine, but let's agree that we're going to at least be respectful. Dr. Cox, would you like to take it over? Number four?
Yeah, and then also, we can agree to disagree. I think that differences can help us grow. And if we are able to share our thoughts and opinions, we can learn from one another. And it's not necessarily a debate of who's right and who's wrong.
Exactly.
And then also, let's try to maintain an open mind. We all have something to share, and it all has relevancy. So we don't want to make someone feel as if their experiences are not relevant. Everybody has something to share. And in order to understand what they have to share, we need to be respectful and mindful of what they have. And then also questions are encouraged. If you're not sure, or if you want someone to expand on what they did share, don't be afraid to bring it up. Say, hey, you know what, I wasn't quite sure about this. Would you mind elaborating? Would you mind expanding? No question is too silly to respond to.
And ladies and gentlemen, notice what we put at the bottom: let's keep it real. I'm going to tell you, I think of the two, my sister's a little bit more diplomatic than I am. I believe in being truthful to what I think and believe. I would encourage you all to do the same. Are there any questions thus far? And I just want to say real quickly to the facilitators, as well as Dr. Cox, because I'm showing the PowerPoint, I'm unable to see any comments. So I'll have to leave that up to you ladies. If people want to, have a question, please let me know, okay? Okay. All right. On that note, let's take a look at today's outline. This is going to sort of guide our conversation for tonight. Dr. Cox?
Okay, so for today's outline, we need to, we're going to go into some prior knowledge. Basically, what do we know about Dr. King? And it can stem from elementary videos of my friend Martin up until his I Have a Dream speech. And we're just going to kind of go over what we already know. And then for 2, we're going to go over actual facts about Dr. King. Why do so many use Dr. King as a moral compass in the Black community? What is so significant about this particular man as opposed to Malcolm X or other great Black leaders? Number 3, examining the I Have a Dream speech, yesterday versus today. Is there a distinction between what has or what has not been accomplished? And then we have 4, have we overcome? We know that in the Black community, the song on the battlefield was "We Shall Overcome." Well, have we done so? If not, what steps do we still need to take to overcome? And then lastly, we would love some feedback on what we go over today.
All right. Any questions or comments? All right. So now that you guys know where we're going, let's go there. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where Dr. Cox and I take a step back, and we're going to ask you to tap into your prior knowledge. Either put in the chat or feel free to unmute. I don't know if you guys do that. What do you guys already know about Dr. King? Feel free to share anything.
Dr. King was a minister.
Okay, very true. Thank you for that.
He led the March on Washington.
Okay, but that's very true. We know he was a Christian minister, and he was the leader of the March on Washington, the one that everybody's going there to hear speak. Thank you for that. Anybody else?
Absolutely.
Hello, he was a symbol of a civil rights and human rights movement.
Okay.
So, like, symbol for people.
All right. Thank you for that. Excellent. Thank you.
Dr. King was the father of I think the civil rights movement and the leader of the New World.
Thank you for that. Isn't it interesting, Dr. Cox, that a lot of people, when they think of King, they think of him as the leader of the civil rights movement. That's interesting. Thank you for that.
Very good. Very good.
Anybody else? Comments? Anything in the chat? All right, so can we agree that most people know a little something about Dr. King? Okay, but here are some actual facts about Dr. King. And I think that once Dr. Cox points out these facts, it might help you guys realize why we use him so often as a moral compass in the Black community. Dr. Cox, will you please go over those actual facts?
So we know that King's maternal great-grandfather, Willis Williams, was a preacher.
And that's him at the bottom, the very first picture.
Okay, in addition to that, King's maternal grandfather, Adam Daniel Williams, began the family's long tenure as pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, serving from 1914 to 1931. Okay. And then we also know that King's father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a preacher at Ebenezer Baptist Church, as well as a leader, as part of a cutoff of the civil rights movement. And then King himself served as co-pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church up until, with his father, from 1960 and then up until his death in 1968. So we see this long lineage of not just religious, but also a level of accountability to carry on or contribute to this legacy in the King, Dr. King's family.
Does everybody see that? Question.
Yes, absolutely.
In the Black community, who is looked up to as one of the most pivotal leaders in the community?
The pastor.
Exactly. There you go. The pastor. Remember, even I'm going back a little bit to slavery. On that Sunday, the one place where Blacks were able to truly be free, if they could experience freedom, was in the church. with their pastor. They can worship freely, but that pastor's the one that gave them hope, that educated them about different things. So the pastor is highly respected in the Black community. So if you're dealing with an individual that comes with a legacy of that, then you don't have to guess why he was looked up to. Any comments or questions about his legacy or why he's looked at as a moral compass? Okay, so we know he comes from good stock, right, Dr. Cox?
Absolutely.
All right, so now we're going to take it to the next step. Now that we looked at a little bit of his legacy, what we're going to be doing right now is looking at some more actual facts that I think will help you guys to see why he is looked up to. So did you guys know he was a strong worker for civil rights for the member of his race, of course, for Blacks? Even though King grew up he grew up middle class, he had a home. He lived in a prestigious Black area in Atlanta, Georgia. His parents were well respected. He really didn't want for much, but nevertheless, he still felt a yearning to help his people. Did you guys know that he was a member of the executive committee of the National Association for the NAACP? I'm sure most of you know that, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys know in 1957, he was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference? Now, this is an organization formed to provide new leadership for the civil rights movement. So once again, not only did he take it beyond his neighborhood, beyond his church, but he's trying to take it national, okay? The ideals for this organization he took from Christianity. And of course, everybody, you should know this. Who motivated Dr. King? Who did he look up to? Feel free to unmute.
Gandhi.
Exactly, Mahatma Gandhi. Remember, practicing nonviolence, okay? He led a massive protest in Birmingham, Alabama. This caught the attention of the entire world, okay? What he called a coalition of conscience, and inspiring his letter from a Birmingham jail. You guys, this was a manifesto of the Negro Revolution. In other words, we got to do something to change things. And in addition to that, he planned the drives in Alabama for the registration of Negroes as voters. And he directed the Peaceful March on Washington, D.C. You guys know over 250,000 people came to hear that wonderful speech. What was that speech called, everybody?
I have a dream.
I have a dream, exactly. So you guys, legacy by itself, is that enough to lead you to be someone that people respect? Is legacy enough?
No, you have to have your own credentials to back that up.
Right, legacy, your own credential, and then are you willing to put in the work? We're gonna come back to that later. Any questions thus far about facts about Dr. King? Okay, so we talked about that, Dr. Cox, and so now we're going to be examining the I Have a Dream speech. Dr. Cox, I believe I'll be doing 2A, 2B, and then you'll be doing 2C, but I still would love for you to chime in, okay? All right, so at this point, you guys, I want you to take a look at these excerpts. I'll read them. We'll discuss them, and I'll have some questions for you. So take a look at this one excerpt. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, you see, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, Black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. So let's go back to 1776, you guys. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are
Equal.
exactly. That was the promise, but let's keep it real. Was that the case in 1776 for everybody?
No.
Clearly not. So let's go forward to 1963. How many years later? I know you guys can do the math because I suck at math. But in 1963, do you guys think that the United States held up to its promise?
And you
know.
also, and you also have to remember that when Dr. King first started his speech of I Have a Dream speech, he piggybacked not only just on the Lincoln Memorial that was in the background, but he was focusing on the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah.
And so that's where he meant 100 years between 1863 and 1963, quote, the Negro still not free, meaning the citizenships that allowed Blacks to vote and to assemble was constantly violated, and yet they have to pay taxes, right? And so that's what Dr. King was playing up on, not just insufficient funds in terms of what the American architect created, but just full-fledged constitutional rights being violated.
Right. So clearly, we know that 1776, even though those words were written, it wasn't true for all. Clearly, in 1963, as my Dr. Cox just said, you know, Blacks were given a bad check. Let's fast forward to 2023, and this is where I would love to hear from you guys. Do you think finally America has made good on that check? This is where you can, so once again, has America finally in 2023 made good on that check? That now all people are created equal?
No.
No, let's start with the Constitution, changing that part, where when we look back at, I don't know it all verbatim, but when the original letters were written, the Constitution was written, Black people were not considered. We were property. We were not even in that language at all as a people. So when you change that language in the Constitution to acknowledge us as a people, then maybe some other stuff will change. And that's just my thought.
Okay,
No, and I
thank
think
you.
that's a very valid point. But in addition to what was written originally in the Constitution, and then you have amendments. You have Amendment 13, 14, and 15, in addition to the Emancipation Proclamation, and it was still being violated.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very, very valid point, that even still with these amendments, it's still not happening. And that's what Dr. King was highlighting. Very good. That's a very good comment.
Thank you. Anyone else? 2023, has America made good on the check? Why or why not?
And I think because they still do things to discount, you know, it's not that all people are gonna, you know, it's not just Black people who are gonna be benefited by voting rights and all of these things, but when they do all of these gerrymandering and all of these things to really lessen the ability of people to make a difference in the voting and get representation that's going to matter to them, I think that's still a missed.
Yeah, thank you
And
for that.
they talked about the John Lewis Act that's been already a couple years in the making, and it's still not come to fruition.
Or
Yeah.
even them having issues with putting into place the Lynching Act. Why is that?
Why is that debatable?
Right
Why is that
there.
debatable? I'm with you on that one, Dr. Cox. Amen. I don't understand why we debating that.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Why is it after all these years that you have Africans that were brought over, is that we're still seem to be a threat? It's still there's a threat involved, and why? You know, you know, I'm not trying to bring up any type of controversy, but I asked my students where in Dr. King's speech, I don't know if anybody has caught it, where he says, quote, "And if America is to be great," versus another slogan that was often said about "Make America Great Again." You know, which quote is the accurate one? Is America have reached its peak of greatness and just fell backwards? Or are we looking still to what Dr. King said, and if America is to be great? You know, where are we in this?
Yeah. That's a good question. Where are we? So thank you for that, you guys. Great discussion. So that's the first excerpt. You have a couple of more. So take a look at this one. So I took this excerpt from there, and then I'm gonna read it. Then I'm gonna make some comparisons. And then once again, I wanna hear what you guys have to say. So here's another excerpt. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to, I want you guys to look at that term, business as usual. So this was from his speech. I want you guys to go back to the 1800s. There was something called the Colfax Massacre that took place in Louisiana. And in that case, nearly 200 colored men were killed. I could go on to the 1920s as well and talk about, we were talking about this earlier, the Black Wall Street, Greenwood. What we're noticing that a lot of time when we see Blacks trying to achieve the American dream, someone gets threatened, people are killed, communities are burned. Of course, Blacks get upset, we react. Something small, oh, well, we'll change this. And then after a while, things return back to business as usual. Let's go to the 1950s. You guys know who that gentleman is, that young boy with the hat? You guys know his name? What's his name?
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till. Think back in the 1950s, a young boy from Chicago goes down in, in Mississippi or so, Alabama, to visit some family. He's accused of what? Being inappropriate with a white woman. He's killed. Blacks react, get angry. 1 or 2 laws change. I guess after a while, people are pacified and things go back to business as usual. So we know about the 63, what's going on with King, right? We know he was assassinated. People are upset. Johnson passed some laws, were appeased. Business as usual. You guys remember what happened in 1992 to this gentleman named Rodney King? You guys remember what happened to him, right? Police brutality.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beaten up. Blacks get angry, loot, burn up South Central LA. What happens? Well, after that, I guess Clinton at the time got some businesses to go in and maybe build a few more Rosses and TJ Maxx. People are appeased, but what happens? Business as usual. You guys were here in 2020, that gentleman there. Whether he was a good person or bad person, whether he was on drugs or not on drugs, whether he was using counterfeit money or not, did that warrant him being killed? Personally, I don't think so. He was killed. Black folks were mad. They looted. After a while, what? I see, remember Dr. Cox, we talked about this. After the George Floyd, I saw a lot more Black people on TV, on commercials. Did you guys notice that? I did.
I saw the Hallmark Channel.
Yes, Hallmark now have Black folks on there.
Hey, we moved.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I hope you guys see the pattern I'm trying to show you.
But you know,
Yeah. Hold on 1 second, Dr. Cox. So once again, you see more people, my sister's loving Hallmark now, more commercial with Black people. You see, okay, Black businesses. But now things are starting, when we talked about this, right, Dr. Cox? Things are coming down and going back to business as usual. So King talks about that. Dr. Cox, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think what was so powerful about, obviously the loss of all 3 of these men, or how they were abused and mistreated by this system in America is unacceptable. I think, but what was so powerful is when you saw variants of Black Lives Matter and it was happening in Italy, and it was happening in France, it was happening in Greece. And I know in Greece, they actually burned down and destroyed the American embassy. I thought it was very, very powerful about how the world was responded to the death, in particularly George Floyd. And I have a colleague in Italy who basically was like, what's going on? What happened with George Floyd? Why was he killed in that capacity? And so I had to break down the history of America. So basically, he was the descendant of a slave, right?
Mhm.
And we know that slaves were property, slaves were not valued at any given time. If a slave misbehaved or didn't act right, it was nothing for their lives to be taken from them. So I do want to say that there was a global notification of how America is and the history of it. And this is a part of the history of America that's very shameful. It's a part of history where they want to act like, well, it's not relevant anymore, if it was a long time ago. But there is definitely post-traumatic stress associated with slavery in this country. And it's not just with Blacks, it's with whites as well, and how we deal with it. This is what Dr. King is talking about, where things come to the surface and then you go back to business as usual.
Right. Right. And I would love to hear what you guys think. Do you agree it's fatal for our nation to overlook this? Is there a danger in going back to business as usual?
Any comments in the chat, or anybody want to say something, share their thoughts? Come on, we want to hear what you
It's a
think.
great danger. I think it's a great danger to go back to business as usual, because even after George Floyd's murder, we have, because things are settled down and we're back, pretty much back to old way of doing things. Even his murderer is trying to get out of jail. And I was just looking at that today, and 9 times out of 10, they will reverse those the sentence that he got and get him out of there, because we have that tendency of going back to business as usual and not holding our Anglo-Saxon or our white folk neighbors accountable for what they do. And so, yeah, I'm just waiting to hear what that verdict is going to be, since he's appealing and they're fighting to get him out. But yeah, we're still living in the same, it's like a circle, or
Like a cycle, right?
Yeah, it's a cycle of behavior that they think that, and this is, I'm not gonna take up too much space.
Okay.
But they think that, okay, just throw them a bone right here and they'll settle down.
Here's the thing, and I hope you don't mind, I call people brothers and sisters.
No, I'm fine. I'm your sister.
Okay. All right. Are we taking that bone? No. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Are we just taking the bone and saying, okay, I got a bone, so I'm good? You know what I mean?
I think also when you think of, for example, Breonna Taylor, she was the Black nurse that was no knock policy, where they busted down her door playing cops and robbers, and they shot the woman and then tried to hide her death after they did so. They were talking about, oh, well, her family was awarded $5 million, $6 million. And I'm thinking this is the proverbial bone that Ms. Cox is talking about. At the end of the day, all the money in the world is not going to bring that woman back from the grave. So are you saying that her life is worth $5 million, or what's the value of a Black life, right? This is where the whole Black Lives Matter, right? We don't want the $5 or $6 million. We want Breonna back, but that's not going to happen.
Isn't that the history of this country, though? Black lives has always had a number tag on it. From slavery, from the time that we were brought here, we've had a number tag on our lives. And so it's not changed.
That's deep. That's deep. Thank you for that. Because you're right with the price. So then as we move on, you guys, we're going to come back to that. How do we get out of this cycle of returning to business as usual? But we're going to continue. Great conversation. Great. Okay, Dr. Cox, you want to go ahead? So right now, Dr. Cox, you're going to be examining the I Have a Dream speech, comparing it yesterday versus today. But we're going to also, I encourage you guys, how does it apply to gays, to whites, to Blacks, to Hispanics, to our Asian brothers and sisters, Pacific Islanders, and Indigenous people. Dr. Cox, take it over.
We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And I think with this particular excerpt, we need to also remember when you go over, like my students right now, I teach 8th grade US history, are actually going over the letters from a Birmingham jail. And when you go down through the letter, it talks about all the strategies that Dr. King utilized to bring to the forefront civil rights that are being violated and what they were willing to do to make it happen, whether it was to go to jail or no retaliation when being attacked. And I think even John Lewis spoke about how he was beaten on the bridge. He could have defended himself, he chose not to. And that was a tactic used by Dr. King. But go ahead, Ms. Cox, take it over.
Okay, so here's my question for you guys today. Do you think, well, I'll address this to you. Have you come to the realization that your destiny is tied up with my destiny, with the destinies of our gay brothers and sisters, our Asian brothers and sisters, our Indigenous brothers and sisters? So if any of you want to speak about your own thoughts about your growth or realization of realizing our interconnectedness as an Americans, I would love to hear from you. I'm asking you to talk about yourself.
Okay.
Come on.
No. I'm enjoying this conversation, ladies. Thank you so much. You know, yes, I think our lives in our intersection, all of our lives are. And I think it was Dr. King that said that any injustice to any is injustice to everyone. So when you think about it in those terms, it doesn't matter whether I'm Black, whether I'm Hispanic, whether I'm LGBTQ, doesn't matter when another race of people, when anybody usurps authority over the rights of another man or woman, it puts us all in a peril, in danger. And so, yeah, our lives intersect because I can't ignore injustice that's being done to LGBTQ. Right. And expect that justice is going to be given to me. It's not. It's not. So yeah, our lives intersect, and we are supposed to be able to dwell together in that peaceful, that harmony that Dr. King talked about. But that's embracing everyone.
That's right. And it's not always easy to do, y'all. Remember, I said I was going to keep it real. I was brought up Christian. My grandmother used to say, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. How many Black folks have heard that? Exactly. I don't know if some of you other Christians have heard that. I grew up hearing that, right, Dr. Cox? Yeah. All my life. But you know what? You realize, how is it fair that I can marry 2, 3, 4 times some no good men simply because I'm straight? But if I have 2 of my gay brothers that love each other and want to marry each other, they can't? Because what? I just disapprove of it? You know what I mean? So these are the hard questions we have to ask ourselves. Anybody else want to speak to that? Your own personal growth. Come on.
Well, you know what? I could jump in there because my thing is, whether you have 2 men that want to be together or 2 women, how's that any of your business? You know, I mean, that's another thing. My thing is, Dr. Cox, worry about your A1C. How about you go walk yourself around the track, or you know what I'm saying?
Ooh,
worry about you. Put that cheesecake.
I told you we would keep it real, y'all. You're talking about our A1C.
I brought that into. Well, actually, good news, it went down. But the point is, you got people that are so caught up in micromanaging that they're not focused on what they need to be focused on. And if you have love in your heart, you wouldn't have that type of animosity.
That right there. You know, but
Go ahead.
Okay, I have something to say. So I'm Sri Lankan, and I came to this country when I was 23 years old, and I assimilated into this country as a international student, and then made it my home. I also come from a mixed family. I come from Dutch and my own indigenous heritage. And I think everywhere in the world, I see, even back in my country, because back in my old country, I do, there is this biases, okay, among different racial groups. Again, I think when we look at differences, we also have to look at cultures too. It's very important that we look at cultures that have not they are not as progressive as where we are today. They are in a very different state. So I think we have to consider those things too. In the rest of the world, let's say we go to Mongolia, or we go to a faraway country, the Pygmies, or wherever, we have to look at cultures too, because
Very good.
we can change the whole world just because the United States wants to change.
True.
Okay, I appreciate that.
No,
First of all,
that's-
thank you for that. Speak to it, Dr. Cox, and then I'll comment.
No, I think that's very valid. And I think
Yes.
that we also can look at the fact that colonization, very few countries have not been affected by those practices, whether it was England or France or Spain. And if you look at the parallel between Gandhi and Dr. King, not only do they share a similar date where Gandhi died January 30th and King's birthday was January 15th, Gandhi's country of India was colonized by the British. So some of the things that Gandhi was fighting is what the so-called Revolutionary War in the United States was about. And so we have to recognize, yes, you're absolutely right, culture, but how much of the culture was affected by colonization?
Yeah,
That is something that you have to consider. And by all means, I'm not at all trying to promote the United States as being the example of how things should be. It should be an example of what not to do, and how to be a part of this creed of, we're supposed to be this representation of accepting of all cultures and all ethnicities, all races, and this country started it off with mistreating the indigenous. You know what I mean? I said, but I think that we can grow from what is right, and we can also grow from what is wrong. And I think that this is a perfect forum to discuss cultures, things that we learned that was positive, things that we learned, because I'll be the first one to admit, there's some things I learned wrong. That was part of the Black culture, part of the African-American culture. And I'm sure that you yourself can look back and maybe even see a distinction between the indigenous people of Sri Lanka, and then what you might have learned from the Dutch side. But how can we grow? How can we share? I want to hear about what's going on with maybe some things that represent you from the Dutch side versus the Sri Lankan side, and maybe that can help me be a better African American. You know what I mean? But there's a reason why you see so many, like I said, a parallel between Gandhi and King, because you had the same so-called founders, the British, doing the same thing all over the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And these countries were not colonized by one group, they were colonized by three groups.
Yes, it was.
True.
The Dutch and the British.
Yeah.
Even
It was
South
the
Africa.
Dutch, the British, you had the Spanish, you have a lot of states named after Spanish, the Spanish that colonized. But when you look at in terms of who took the presidents in the United States, and then you see this pattern, what happened in Australia, what happened in India, what happened in South Africa, you see a pattern there.
New Zealand.
You had in the United States, it was called segregation, but in South Africa, it was apartheid, but it was the same script.
Yeah.
you know, and they were called colored over there. So hopefully, like I said, we can use platforms like this and many more platforms to learn more about each other's cultures. And also with Dr. King, he symbolized unity. He symbolized love. He symbolized forgiveness. He symbolized acceptance. And if we're to heal as a people worldwide, we're going to have to do better than what we're doing. It's not just exclusive to the United States. We're going to have to do better than what we're doing.
Right.
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
I like what you said about the USA maybe paving the way for everything, because I always kind of found like USA or Canada, maybe Australia, but specifically USA as a unique situation, as there is so many cultures that came, were invaded, were discovered in here. So it's like there is this kind of war raging about like who has the right to this land, and it just creates more tension. Which is of course like we should be friends. I feel like if people want an excuse, they will just find an excuse. So I feel like it does have to kind of come from a USA, because when it comes to anything regarding human rights currently, or else it comes from USA, because USA has a unique experience of having all these super different cultures together, which is not true for like other countries.
Yeah, that is true.
Homogeneous. So it's like they kind of always look at you is like, oh, look what's happening there, as like there is a way to solve this. I mean, it was like, oh, look there, it's working, so why can't it work in here?
No, that's very, very true. That's a very good point, because it is identified as kind of a melting pot. You know, but I think also what America does, which is wrong, is they try to start off the genesis of America with colonization, and there were indigenous people here first. And that's another deception. There's been too many Hallmark channels, I'm gonna quote myself, where they'll have a certain particular ethnic group saying, and my grandmother started here on this ranch, and all she had was, and I'm thinking, whose land did you steal it from? The colonists were not indigenous. That's hence the word colonists. They came from another country, and they nearly eradicated the Native American people. So there's some things that the United States need to be honest about it and quit trying to rewrite history in a narrative that's not true.
Yeah.
The same way they and I don't want to detour a little bit, but the same way they gave this illusion that all Blacks wanted was to be free, but they didn't want to have the rewards of being citizenship, of having citizenship, right? They weren't given the reward of citizenship, but at least you're not a slave anymore. And that's supposed to be good enough. And Dr. King was saying that's not good enough. So we got to be careful of the narratives that we paint that are to give a certain slant that is not true. And I think also that's what Dr. King was fighting. And that's why he quoted the Constitution. That's why he quoted the famous words of Thomas Jefferson.
Another thing, if I may, and then we'll move on. You guys, what I liked about King is he truly tried to practice what he preached. I had a very intense conversation with my cousin. And one of the reasons why he was so committed to this fight, did you guys know King had fallen in love with a white woman and wanted to marry her? How many of you guys knew that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. Fell in love with a white woman, wanted to marry her, but I'm sure his family swayed him from that, because if you're the new face of the civil rights movement, married to a white woman, maybe at that time they weren't ready. I'm sure that's what they told him. But from a lot of people stated that was one of the main reasons why he did what he did. He wanted to marry that white woman. He loved her. Another thing, real quickly, I want you guys to see that first gentleman. You see the Black gentleman there? Are you familiar with Bayard Rustin? Did you guys know Bayard Rustin was one of King's advisors, and he was gay? Now you imagine a Black minister in the South having a Black gay man as an advisor. You know he got some kickback from that. We can't forget all of our Jewish brothers and sisters who also aided us. A lot of the Catholics aided us. Remember Andrew Goodman, one of the white boys, along with the other brother that were killed when they were trying to register blacks to vote.
Yeah, the
You
freedom
know,
riders.
so King always tried to use a wide group of individuals to advise him. Okay. And lastly, I know sometimes, because Dawn, when you and I lived in Europe, there are some Americans that when they travel abroad, they want to act like we know it all, that we're the best at everything. And that sort of creates sort of a, like a,
Animosity.
yeah, cockiness, like, oh, we're all that and you're nothing. I have a profound respect for all cultures. Every country has their issues. Every country has areas in which they can grow. I don't think personally, my feelings that we should try to push our agendas on others. But I do know that in this country, we have something called the Constitution. And if we're going to live up to what that highest law of the land says, there are certain things we have to do. Having said that, here's my question to all of you. Have we overcome? Have we overcome what? What are some things? Have we overcome racism, prejudices, biases, sexism, homophobia? And if not, we can complain all day. What are some steps that we can do to overcome? Because we love to complain, don't we? We can go back in history and say this happened, that. How do we find solutions? So here's my deeper question. What have you done personally to help overcome, how about educational barriers that a lot of people face? What have you all done? Have you done anything? I would love to hear from you. Ooh, we're quiet. Come on, folks. Have you helped anyone that you know that was disadvantaged overcome an educational barrier?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please share. What is it that you do?
So I'm a therapist and a teacher for the visually impaired.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
I have always crossed over, kind of invested my time and my profession in working with people who are disabled.
Beautiful.
Bless you. You see, guys,
Beautiful.
putting your words into action to helping others.
Beautiful.
King, I can't speak for him, but I think he would be very pleased with you. Thank you. What about the rest of you? How often have you guys gone and volunteered and worked with kids in disadvantaged neighborhoods?
I'm excited.
Yes, absolutely.
I know that I was just asked last week, and I got an email today where I was invited to teach a lesson at a school in downtown LA, Skid Row, where they have a high population of homeless children. So I was so touched that they asked me down there to teach. And first, I think she was trying to convince me they're good kids. I said, listen, you have homeless children all over the place, and I'm not going to think any differently. And I was honored that they asked me to come down there. So I'm excited about that.
Good for you, Dr. Cox.
Congratulations.
Anybody else?
I personally like to volunteer in places that they promote like a cultural exchanges and a diversity, because there's so many different cultures in the world, so it's so beautiful. So getting to know them all, and I feel like this also kind of helps people to kind of go out of their comfort zone, like to discover things that other people live. So that's kind of my favorite part or place to volunteer with, because you can also meet like really great friends in there. That's kind of like also the best part of it.
Very good. True.
It's so important that we learn about different cultures so that we can understand one another. That maybe what's okay here isn't okay in Sri Lanka. Maybe what's okay in Canada isn't okay in Mexico. And so being aware and educated is important. You guys are probably wondering, why did I put that? Because time and time again, surveys have shown the great equalizer between the disparities of the different cultures is education. So if anything that you all can do to help others who are disadvantaged, to educate them, teaching them to read, to think, to write, educating them about your cultures, like some of you guys educated me about yours. That's excellent. Let's go to the next one. What have you done personally to help others to overcome financial barriers?
So I think the same thing, tutoring and mentoring. As we are one united, that's our mission, is to support underserved communities. So through partnerships with banks and, trying to get into the Palm Springs Unified to deliver our after school program. These are things that we are one united, and us as part of me as part of the organization are doing to really move the needle on the inequities.
Very good.
Excellent, excellent. And what about social barriers? When you hear your friend talking badly about another group, are you that person? Are you strong enough to say, come on, maybe you need to rethink this, or maybe you need to educate yourself? I think the social barrier one is pretty major still. What are your thoughts on that?
I think sometimes people are quick to use social status to justify them being better. They don't feel good about themselves, and so sometimes they'll target a marginalized group of people and to make themselves feel like they're more important. And I think that is unfortunate. And that's one of the things that we have to realize, that you can't blame other people for where you are or where you're not. You got to take accountability for yourself, and you definitely don't make it a practice of attacking other people. Again, if you have love in your heart, that wouldn't even be a consideration,
Yeah, so these are some questions I hope you guys will, look inward at. And having said that, ladies and gentlemen, this pretty much concludes our presentation. I would love to hear any feedback, thoughts, comments, further questions, any suggestions on what perhaps Dr. Cox and I can do in the future to make our conversations better.
I think it was a very enjoyable conversation and brought up a lot of great dialogue. I thank both you and Dr. Cox for your time and joining us and leading this conversation. I love the energy and passion that you all brought to this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, my sister. I appreciate
you. Thank you for having us. You guys were fabulous, and everyone had such great ideas and great reference. You guys had such great personal reference that needed to be heard. And thank you for sharing that.
And I think in that last question, I kind of didn't really get a chance to answer on the social, but I think, I have young children, a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and anybody that I meet in communities, friends, whoever it is, like, my message is just to really uplift people.
Amen.
There's so much negativity in the world.
Oh my God,
that it's our job to really uplift those around us. And, that really means if somebody's saying and doing things that don't uplift someone else, that you really call them out on that and really say, hey, you know what could you say that would make that person feel good about themselves, or, act in a different way? Why are we always trying to cut people down? We need to think about and say the right things that make people feel energized, empowered, and uplifted.
Thank you. Because our kids are angry, y'all. I'm telling you, my sister and I talk about it every day. My sister's being referee. She didn't sign up for that. She just wanted to teach. Our kids are angry, and they're getting it from somewhere. Having said that, speaking of anger, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get a little political for 2 seconds and I'll be done. You guys help us. Everything we talked about tonight, we're trying to bring about change in our school district. If at all you feel compelled to want to bring about some change and having a more diverse curriculum at our particular school district, and if you feel compelled that, maybe there's some suggestion that you can give our school district, here is the PSUSD board. We have a board meeting January 24th. Just like we had this conversation with you guys, we're going to have this conversation with our board. And if you don't have time to get their email, you can go to the Palm Springs Unified School District website, and all of their emails are there. So we want to try to evoke change, positive change. And also, if you can express a desire for consistent multicultural education in all the schools, not just the ones where, oh, there's that one teacher willing to do the work. We want to be proactive in educating the whole child. Studies show that Black children are 13% more likely to go to college if they have one Black teacher before third grade, and 33% likely to go to college if they have two. In our school district, Black children, even though we make up 1 or 2%, they're making up the majority of the suspensions, expulsions, not doing well. And this has been going on since the Palm Springs Unified School District began. So I'm like pulling out my wig. Yes, my wig, I bought it, but it's mine.
Looks
Thinking,
good.
why are we, thank you, baby, thank you. What's going on? Why don't we make some changes? How do we make teachers and administrators accountable for teaching about all the cultures? That includes our Latino children, Filipino children, all of them. And guess what? White children need to know history too, all of them. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you disagree with us, but you want to talk to us one-on-one, this is your email. Dr. Cox, what's your email?
pdon29@yahoo.com.
And mine is jcox@psusd.us. Please feel free to call me or email me. Once again, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to stop this. This has been wonderful. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank
joining.
you.
Thank you very much.
2 minutes over. Okay.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Be safe.
All right. On that note, thank you. Take care.
Have a great night. Thank you so much. You ladies were awesome. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your
You're
time.
awesome as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. And thank you, Ms. Quanahan, for having us here. This was wonderful.